The next proper adaptation I could find was released 6,680 days after the Mouse Factory episode. If they had just released this 20 days earlier, we could have kept to a spooky theme, but no. But this is a big one because June 1st, 1990 saw the release of the first video game representation I have been able to find of the Haunted Mansion. I refer, of course, to Adventures in the Magic Kingdom for the NES, one of many beloved Disney games made by Capcom. In this game, Goofy has lost the keys to the castle, and you have to find them by getting to the end of attraction minigames and by answering trivia. Now, before we get any further, yes, the title is Adventures in the Magic Kingdom, but the mansion exterior in the game looks more like the Disneyland mansion, and the castle on the box art is Cinderella's castle, but the castle in the game looks more like Sleeping Beauty's castle, plopped on top of the Great Wall of China. And the map layout doesn't resemble any existing park, but it's closer to Disneyland Park than to Magic Kingdom, Florida. And that's mostly because this is a relic of a time when Disney wasn't quite as precious about specific nomenclature in their branding, and often used the phrase Magic Kingdom to refer not specifically to Magic Kingdom Park in Florida, but to the general idea of a Disneyland-style Magic Kingdom Park. Disneyland itself was frequently referred to as the Magic Kingdom before there even was a Florida park. So when this game advertises itself as Adventures in the Magic Kingdom, it's not saying that it's Adventures in the Magic Kingdom Trademark Park located at 11807 Seas Drive, Lake Buena Vista, Florida 32830. It means Adventures in a hypothetical amalgamation of all Magic Kingdoms. Adventures in the idea of a Magic Kingdom. That way they're legally not claiming that this is the adventure you'll have when you visit any specific Magic Kingdom, because the Haunted Mansion at all those is an Omnimover ride and not a side-scrolling platformer. But here, the Haunted Mansion is just one of your quests on your way to find the 6 keys that unlock the not specifically branded castle. As you begin your quest, Mickey gives you the Dennis Nedry pose as he cheerfully warns you that you could die. Then if you do die, he gives you the same pose and callously tells you to try again. So the level begins, and the first thing you see is this really scary ghost guy, and if you touch him now, it's insta-death. And instead of friendly Mickey shaming you, it's scary ghost guy shaming you. Traumatizing. The first part of the level is the cemetery, most likely meant to reflect the queue outside the ride, but borrowing a little from the graveyard scene in the ride, and also adding Nosferatu zombies! Nothing like that in the ride. You can kill them by throwing a single candle at them. The main thing borrowed from the graveyard scene is the heads popping up behind the gravestones. Some of them are Dracula. Some of them are Fido Dido. Then you move inside the mansion where you can start collecting more candles to throw at enemies, and the scary ghost guy does like a Scooby-Doo mirror gag. He doesn't go quite full Groucho and Harpo with it, and it's not quite Hitchhiking Ghost either, since his reflection doesn't appear alongside yours, but hey, it's cute. For, being scary. And we get bottomless pits, which, are in the ride, but not as far as guests know. We get falling chandeliers, which aren't in the ride. And we get hands that reach out of coffins, which I guess is a reference to the coffin occupant, except the lid was finally removed and suddenly he's lost interest in getting out and now he just wants to drag you in. Also, he's lying lengthwise in the coffin, or he's just placing his hands weirdly, or he has a companion in there with him. No wonder he lost interest in getting out. Have fun, you two. Oh, and also, while the zombies can be killed with 1 candle hit, each hand takes 3. You got some strong-ass hands there, Rockbiter. Then you ride this flying chair up to the upper level, where you're in the ballroom, and we get our most explicit bit of iconography from the ride thus far, the ballroom dancers. And they seem to be minding their own business, but they still hurt you if they touch you, so you gotta kill them. I don't want to, they're just having a nice time, they're not hurting anybody. Well, except me, but I feel bad killing these lovers in eternal embrace. But the castle key isn't gonna find itself, so die, dancers! Then there's some tedious platforming as you hop across floating chairs and chandeliers, and you eventually find a different shaped floating chair, which takes you up to the attic for even more tedious platforming, as you ride a floating chair over a bottomless pit and try not to get knocked over by flying books. Then you jump across chairs that will fall shortly after you land on them, all while avoiding swooping ghosts who look like parrots, and finally you ride one last chair up to the boss battle. The singing busts are there, although their placement is more reminiscent of the watchful busts, and there's plenty of candles to stock up on as the scary ghost guy comes in for the attack, and you gotta fight him off. And once you defeat him, Goofy gives you the key. Isn't Goofy the one who lost the keys in the first place? I'm starting to suspect the narrative of this game wasn't intricately crafted by an author with a master plan. And then on December 16th came the final adaptation from 1994, our next video game to feature the Haunted Mansion, a game released only in Japan for the Super Famicom, whose title translates as Mickey's Grand Adventure in Tokyo Disneyland. This is a game where Mickey has to gather all his friends for the big show, navigating platform levels based on Tokyo Disneyland attractions using both helium and water balloons. The Haunted Mansion level starts off immediately with more recognizable mansion iconography than Adventures in the Magic Kingdom did by showing us a stretching room portrait. And it's actually a squash and stretch portrait. Okay, that's not the way those portraits stretch, but the spirit is there. And in this first part of the mansion, Mickey has to go up, which I actually think is a pretty clever way of adapting the feeling of the stretching room to a game mechanic and a side-scroller. There's no hanging body at the top, just a ghost below you that will catch you if you fail, which I learned from bitter experience because I'm bad at video games. Fortunately, if this ghost gets you, you don't lose a life, only 1 health point, but you do have to start over from the bottom of the stretching room. Then there's the Hall of Doors, and each door leads to another passage where you have to do something. One of the passages is yet another tall climbing thing, because Tokyo didn't have a Tower of Terror yet, so they had to put all their tall bits into the Haunted Mansion. You have to race this ghost up to the top of the stairs to get to the door before he blocks it, and you have to land on these buttons to open the stairs while he just gets to float up to the top. It's tedious and frustrating. But if you beat him to that door, you went to the library, where the watchful busts are just kind of minding their own business, so I want to leave them alone, but the door's locked and there's nothing else in this room, so I guess I gotta attack them. And when I do, books fall on me and hurt me. Okay. When I attack a bust, I can move under his ledge so the books don't hit me, but if I'm under his ledge when he's finally defeated, he might hurt me on his way out. Complicated. Anyway, once you defeat them all, the door opens and you push this button on this machine. Then you go back to the entrance, back down the stairs, back to the Hall of Doors for another passage. This one's got knights you can either defeat or avoid, then you gotta navigate this little underground tunnel without falling in a bottomless pit and dying of starvation. Then you gotta trigger both these buttons at the same time to open the door, which requires 2 water balloons, and is probably not actually that tricky to get timing-wise, but it was for me because I suck at video games. But you make it into the door, into the next hallway, which is just loaded with knights, but you run to the end, open another door, trigger another machine, and try to make it back without dying. I failed. Fortunately, continuing from a game over did not send me back to the bottom of the stretching room, just the corridor of doors. But I did have to redo the parts I already did, which was obnoxious. Then I gave up on this game and just watched a video on YouTube. So it looks like the next passage had paintings and doors that fall, then you go into a hall with bad guys in disguise as treasure chests, and a button on the ceiling. Then that opens the door to the room with real treasure chests and another machine. Then one last tall room where you have to tediously balloon your way up until you get to a ledge, go in a door, go in another door, and you're in the seance room. And then you have to throw water balloons at Madame Leota, and I don't love the idea of fighting her, but I like that the floating instruments are like her shield. That's a fun way to adapt ride iconography to a game mechanic. Anyway, once she disappears, the door opens, another machine. Once you've triggered all 4 machines, the door that let you in now leads you out to the graveyard, which has, ghosts floating around and some popping up behind headstones. That one might be the Beating Heart Bride, it's hard to tell. Then you make it through and you throw water balloons at Ghost Pete. And that's the mansion level. I like the aesthetics of this game, the visuals are great, the mansion looks so fun rendered into these graphics. This looks much better than Adventures in the Magic Kingdom's mansion level, but the gameplay here is even more tedious. I got mild enjoyment out of the balloon mechanic, but only mild, and each task to progress through the mansion was just frustrating. Clearly, I am not a hardcore enough gamer to handle commercials for theme parks starring Mickey Mouse designed for children. Then in 1998, we get 3 adaptations that feature the Mickey Mouse Gang. On July 24th, there was a Game Boy game in Japan only called Tokyo Disneyland Fantasy Tour, and it had mini-games based on several attractions, including one where Goofy enters the mansion. Alright, Goofy's going to the Haunted Mansion, and I don't read Japanese, I can't read this exposition. I assume that's saying there's 999 happy haunts, but there's room for 1,000, but beyond that, I don't know what's being conveyed to me here. Okay, game starts, and hey, Leota let her hair down. She looks good. She's giving us more exposition that I can't read. Okay, what am I supposed to do here? Do I literally just choose the same design she shows me? It can't be that simple, right? Let me try a different design. Okay, that was wrong, and let me try the same design again. Wow, it's not even a memory game, it's just a matching game on the level of a Celebrity Jeopardy question on SNL. That's disappointing for a Mansion minigame, but that's a nice rendering of Leota. Much better than either of the books that came with records. Then on March 23, 2000, we got another video game, Walt Disney World Quest Magical Racing Tour.
Welcome to Walt Disney World.
And you thought the Disney park attractions of today had way too long names. I was aware of this game when it came out, but I didn't play it at the time because, we didn't own consoles, and I guess the PC version was a little too expensive considering how interested I was, but it made sense to me to turn theme park attractions into racetracks because theme park attractions loop, once someone unloads, then the next guest loads, and it made sense to just have a Mario Kart clone go through Disney World attractions. And boy howdy is this a Mario Kart clone. So yeah, never played it myself until working on this video, where I am playing an emulation of the PlayStation version on my MacBook, which is probably not the ideal gameplay experience, but what do you want from me? I'm not a gaming channel. At least not for games made after 1999. The central characters of this game are Jiminy Cricket and Chip and Dale in their Rescue Rangers garb. Chip and Dale aren't nearly as scared of the mansion here as they are in A Day at Disneyland, which I looked at for this video, but ultimately decided didn't add enough narrative to count as an adaptation. There's also other playable characters who are original to the game, but they're reminiscent of existing Disney characters. Look, it's not Gizmo Duck. Look, it's not Brer Bear. Look, it's not Magica Dispel. But that's not important. What's important is driving through the Haunted Mansion at breakneck speeds. And what's important is that this is the first video game we've played today to actually use the mansion music, although good luck hearing it over the sound of the engines. So I raced, and I was doing okay at the start, until I ended up going the wrong way somehow, and then ended up somehow stuck behind the wrought iron mausoleum gate. I don't think that's supposed to be possible, but I found a way. Okay, yeah, I'm not good at this. At least not good at this on a keyboard. Screw the racing, I just want to do time trial mode because I just want to look at how they brought the mansion to this game. That's right, the mansion isn't designed for speeding past, it's meant for taking in. So you start outside, I like how the gates open during the countdown, you go in through the Florida Q canopy, into the foyer, and into the stretching room, which doesn't stretch while you're in it, but each lap it's a little more stretched, which is pretty clever. And they got all 4 paintings, even the ones that are behind you while you're racing through. That's attention to detail. Of course, you can skip the stretching room if you take the shortcut through the fireplace, which puts you right in the library. Then you go up the stairs in the direction of your choosing, but both paths reconnect in the candelabra hallway. Then you have to make a very sharp turn into the conservatory. Don't go down the endless hallway, you just can't. And then you can go around the occupant's coffin, there's bonuses around the other side, but it's faster to just go past it, past the clock, into the seance room where Leota's ball is there, but the rendering doesn't really allow her to be there. At least not on this PlayStation emulator. Then, instead of the balcony overlooking the ballroom, the seance room leads directly into the floor of the ballroom, and you can drive through the dancers, but it doesn't hurt them or you in this game, so that's good. They're actually ghosts, you just go right through them. Then you loop around, go up the stairs to the balcony, where you can either shortcut over the balcony or take the long way around the hall. Then you drive up the stairs into the attic where you can drive right through the Beating Heart Bride and crash out one of 2 windows until you land in the graveyard where most of the characters are there, just, rendered in very low-res sprites. And you make it into the Hitchhiking Ghost Mausoleum where you hear a staticky soundbite of Paul Frees telling you to beware.
When the trapdoors creak
and you see the ghosts, which look straight out of a 1996 GeoCities fan page. You can even see the Hitchhiking Ghost mirrors, although they don't actually reflect anything. I guess that effect was harder to do on a PlayStation than it was on an NES. Then you can just barely make out little Leota above you, and you're back in the woods, back at the start of the track. The graphics are what they are, but considering how fast you're supposed to zip past all this, it's amazing they put in as much detail as they did. Like, it's all here, proportioned a little differently, but still, I don't think they skipped a single detail that was at Florida's mansion at the time. All in all, not a bad use of the mansion. It fits the needs of a ride track layout pretty well. Also, love the vehicles. They actually turned the Doom buggies into a Dune buggy. Just no notes, perfect. Also, toward the end of the year, on December 7th, a Game Boy Color version of the game came out. My understanding is all the other ports of the game are pretty similar to each other, but of course the Game Boy Color is an entirely different console with far more limited capabilities, so how do you port a racing game to that? not particularly well, it looks like. I guess I recognize some mansion-y architecture, but come on, putting the ballroom before the library? What are you doing, Game Boy Port team? Then, 6 days later, on October 16th, the first video game dedicated entirely to the mansion came out. This was part of the promotional push for the movie. Even though the game only has slight connections to the movie, the biggest connections are the design of the mansion and the use of the same Dapper Dan rendition of Grim Grinning Ghosts. While the game takes its aesthetics from the then upcoming movie, the story is completely different. It's set in the past, the mansion is under a different curse, and Leota is neither Audley nor Tilly, she's...
Oh, I, child, am Madame Leota, speaker of the spirit world, medium of the mysterious, and seer of things unseen.
The Southern Belle. With that voice, I feel like her name should be Blanche. You play as Ezekiel Holloway, not to be confused with the Ezekiel in this book. The game's Ezekiel seems to be a variant on the Groundskeeper, a young, lanky, awkwardly jumping version of the Groundskeeper. He's summoned to the mansion by a job prospect, but it turns out Leota summoned him to help with the curse, as she dumps just the most exposition in the world on him.
This house was once home to many friendly ghosts, but a powerful, evil man named Atticus Thorne has taken over the estate, corrupting the memories of many of the ghosts. An ancient artifact will aid us in this effort, a sacred lantern. He'll be creating magical barriers throughout the mansion and twisting the very rooms themselves until we can turn on the lights and undo his spells. As the good power of these souls increases in the beacon, their energy will enable us to break down the magical barriers that Thorne has erected. But there is more I have to tell. The primary source of the beacon's power lies in the 6 sacred gems that adorn it. I'm sorry if you find this confusing, Zeke, but I'm afraid we have little time and much to do.
Still, Zeke seems to be taking it pretty well. Leota comes with you, essentially playing the role of a slightly more helpful Navi from Ocarina of Time, and also dumping more exposition. And much like in the movie, the real chills come not from the ghosts, but from the spiders. I certainly appreciate that the familiar mansion ghosts are not your enemies, but rather the ones you need to rescue.
Something's missing. Can we get more cowbell?
Yeah, shouldn't you be demolishing Country Bear Hall? And I appreciate the way the game attempts to marry aesthetics from the movie with aesthetics from the ride, even if it's more of a switching back and forth between them than an actual organic blend. And I appreciate the Doom Buggy Easter egg, despite there being no narrative justification for it. There's a lot I appreciate in this game, but I did not enjoy playing it. It wasn't frustrating in the way some of the earlier games were frustrating, where I just kept failing. It was just tedious, repetitive quests over and over and over, and I was just aching for bigger variety in gameplay. I appreciate how much this game tries to do justice to the feel of the mansion and expand the world of the mansion, but it's not fun to play. But if you gave the same plot to a point-and-click adventure in the Haunted Mansion, I'd be interested in that. Then the 2010s came around, and 2 years in a row, we got video games that feature a version of Disneyland. Or in the first case, a sort of netherworld Disneyland. Yes, the first game is Epic Mickey, the video game whose development required Disney to trade a whole-ass human being to Universal for a rabbit. Epic Mickey is set in the Wasteland, where forgotten characters live. Some of them are characters whose stories were told but have since been forgotten. Others are characters who were abandoned before they were even released. And Oswald has shaped the Wasteland into a bizarro Disneyland, building attractions that parallel the Disney attractions, and even building animatronics of the Mickey gang. The game's full of deep Disney fan service, with main levels being set in these bizarro Disney park realms, and in-between levels set in these side-scrolling takes on classic Mickey cartoons. The Wasteland's equivalent of New Orleans Square is the Bog Easy, and it's populated with some familiar haunts. Yep, big surprise, it's the Lonesome Ghosts, who apparently have been forgotten despite showing up several times in previous adaptations covered on this list. Maybe someday I'll get tired of seeing them pop up in mansion adaptations, but I doubt it. I love those silly guys. Here, the side-scroller levels are based on Lonesome Ghosts, as well as a few other Mickey cartoons, and you finally get to the Wasteland's equivalent of the Haunted Mansion. Lonesome Manor, an imposing mansion cobbled together from unfinished pieces of haunted mansions around the world. I like that Lonesome Manor incorporates a mishmash of all mansion designs, but kind of a missed opportunity to not just have this be the Museum of the Weird. Inside the manor, there's architecture reminiscent of the mansion, as well as familiar marble busts who give you advice, platform puzzles with floating tables, and plenty of restless spirits for you to rescue. Then there's a fun twist on the stretching room with variants of the portraits that are familiar but not identical to the ones we know. Boy, did this lady marry all of the singing busts? You have to realign them so that the portions are lined up properly. A simple but effective little puzzle. I enjoyed it. Much more fun than the Famicom take on the stretching room. Then there's the library, which is in chaos right now, and this is where you meet Madame Leona. Leona, with an N. The game leaves it ambiguous whether Leona is a forgotten draft of Leota, or if she's a creation of Oswald in his Bizarro theme park, but she's basically Leota in everything but one letter. We know she's not a toon because thinner doesn't work on her and just kinda annoys her. She wants you to restore order to the library, and she has other tasks for you as well. You don't have to do all the tasks, but the more you do for her, the more she'll help you out later. So this Leona variant on Leota is not quite as benevolent as some, not quite as vicious as others. She's very much a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours type, and you know, that's fair enough. I think that's a good place for Leota to be. Also, there's a hatchet here that belongs to Constance, who was apparently once the owner of Lonesome Manor. I love that Constance used to run the manor. I imagine she was a resident of Wasteland up until the moment she was brought back to the real world to replace the Beating Heart Bride. Then there's the ballroom, where the organ is giant, sentient, and grumpy. You can befriend him by somewhat tediously jumping on the keys he wants you to play. It's annoying, but still less annoying than a lot of the games I've played today. Then you make your way up the pipes to the attic. And in the attic, you fight the Mad Doctor, and it doesn't have that much mansion-y stuff, so I don't have to keep talking about it. Out of all the video games I played for this video, this may not be the best mansion adaptation, but it is far and away the most fun game. I'm actually going to continue playing this game for fun, and that is not something I can say about the others. Then in 2011, we got a far more faithful version of Disneyland Park in Connect Disneyland Adventures. This faithfully recreates the park layout, minus corporate sponsorship and Lucasfilm rides, since this was before the buyout, but much like all the earlier video games, the attractions are represented with mini-games, most of which are built around the Kinect motion control. But then in 2017, the game was re-released for Xbox One and Windows as simply Disneyland Adventures, no Kinect required, so there's also controller and keyboard controls available. I couldn't get either of the Xbox versions or the Windows version to work on my MacBook no matter what emulator I use, so I played the Windows version on my roommate's computer, which is a bit old and slow, so I played it on the lowest possible graphics settings, and even then the controls weren't super responsive. I can't judge if that's a problem with the game itself or just the computer I was using, so I won't let that factor into my review too much. I just want to see how this game represents the Haunted Mansion. I approached the mansion and noticed that the area that was at the time the Fast Pass station just leads right into the main queue, which has the singing bus. That's fun. Then I ran past all the people waiting in line to skip ahead because I'm the main character and I wait for nothing, except the loading screen, which has me falling in space for an approximate eternity. But once it got close to loading, I was given the helpful advice of don't tumble into something, which is just good to keep in mind throughout life, and careful of the painting. As soon as we enter the mansion, we find ourselves outside the exterior we just came in through, but now it's dark. In fairness, that does sometimes happen in actual Disneyland Resort attractions. And we get Paul's dialogue read by Corey. At least he's not doing Hans this time. But as soon as I'm inside, a ghost warns me to go back, so I run into the stretching room where Leota is mad that I've shown up. I guess this is another villain Leota take. So the room stretches and the ghosts drop me and the gameplay begins as I collect coins while trying not to tumble into something, and Corey reads Paul's lines in a seemingly random order.
Is this haunted room actually stretching? Or is it your imagination? Of course, there's always my way.
You know, conversations mean things, right? with the very occasional new line that actually justified hiring Corey instead of just reusing Paul's audio. There's iconic pieces of mansion furniture that you don't want to bump into. Is the coffin occupant waving at me? That's fun. Then there's this bit where I figured out too late that what you're supposed to do is make the pose in the hole to fit through the painting. This was clearly designed for Kinect motion controls. Still, as far as I can tell, the worst thing that happens if you screw up in the game is you lose some coins. There seems to be no actual death in this game, so even the tedious parts here are far less frustrating than in most of the other games I've played. The second mansion minigame is Escape the Mansion, where you're moving from room to room and there's ghosts, and you're supposed to defeat them. You can do this either by shining a flashlight on them for long enough, or just by ducking and letting them go. That counts as winning. If they fly over you while you're ducked, you get the points, even if it looks like they touched you. If they go through you while you don't duck, you get hurt. But again, there's no actual death in this game, so do whatever you want. Really, the only thing you need to do in this part is move your character so they don't just get stuck behind something. You go through several mansion rooms and can choose some alternate paths at some point. Each room is a fun rendering, even if the actual gameplay is a tad repetitive and uninvolved. Then when you're done with all that, you move up the stairs and Phineas possesses this suit of armor and becomes a completely different ghost and starts chasing you. And on the PC version, you're supposed to repeatedly hit P to run, not just hold it, as I eventually figured out. But again, no death, so even if he catches you, he doesn't really catch you. He just keeps chasing you, down the hallway, around the conservatory, through the corridor, and eventually into the seance room. Then in a cutscene, you knock the grandfather clock into him, because it's not like defeating him might have made for fun gameplay. And now you're in the seance room, moving around the table while Leota chants that things fly at you. Once again, you attack ghosts with the flashlight, and you can kill Leota with the flashlight, but I don't wanna.
Unlock the crypt with a skeleton key.
Key? Crypt? Damn it, are you the movie version of Leota? That's it, you're dead. That didn't feel good. I don't like killing Leota. But you don't have to kill Leota, you can just make your way around the table and leave. And making it through the room defeats her off camera or something. Now you're in the ballroom, and as you make your way down, Constance is the big boss now. I guess she didn't want to wait for you to come to the attic. I'm more okay killing Constance than Leota because, you know, Constance is a murderer. There are other ghosts that aren't bothering you, and you can defeat them, but you don't have to. This isn't like the side-scrollers. The ones who aren't bothering you can just be ignored. Although if you only destroy one dancer, it is kind of funny watching their partner just continue to dance without them. What? Oh, she's gone? Oh, I hadn't noticed. I was only thinking about me. Anyway, you make your way through the ballroom, skip the attic and the graveyard, and get a final cutscene with the hitchhikers. The gameplay is nothing to write home about, but I like seeing the mansion characters and rooms rendered here. I would love a full game with these assets, something on the scale of the 2003 game, but, you know, more fun than that.
So hurry back, we would like your company.